So we don't have motivational score that the kids come in with, right? What do? We watch their behaviors. We watch the patterns associated with their behaviors. And what we realize is that over time, their behaviors will predict and tell us a little bit about their motivation in this class. So if you have a learning goal orientation in math, that means you like to take risks and you like challenge and you persist and you want to get smarter and all that stuff. And you have a performance goal orientation in PE, you don't want to look stupid, you don't want to make a mistake, so you're not going to do anything, okay, you don't want to take risks. Well, that makes sense in one class and not the other because maybe your interest level is different. Your skill level is different. So we're going to see this be very independent of classrooms. So kids can demonstrate different types of goal orientations depending upon the content. So we can't group kids or categorize kids with these simple ideas of like, oh, that kid's just not very motivated, but that kid is. That kid is motivated in this material, but he may not or she may not be motivated in another content area, and vice versa. Every kid is a different person with different interests, different motivational levels, different experiences, all of that stuff. And we're trying to play off of those things. Now, changing direction for a second here, think about this. I want you to, right now, think of your senior year in high school. And I want you to think of someone that you would consider to be super, super smart, okay? Like a brainiac, right? And as soon as you think of that person, I want you to raise your hand. Did you notice how it probably took you about 3 seconds to, probably not even that long. You probably had somebody in mind just by me saying super smart or brainiac, you had somebody in mind, right? Okay. What we realize is that motivation is oftentimes in an academic setting, is tied to our belief about intelligence, our beliefs about smarts and who's got what and how easy some things come to some people and really hard for other people. And we start making these kind of relationships between smarts, intelligence, and ability and stuff. And the way that the students view this stuff really shapes their motivation. We have two different approaches when it comes to these beliefs about intelligence. Been well documented in the literature of these children's beliefs and where they come from and all that stuff. And the two different views that we have is one is an entity view and the other one is an incremental view. With an entity view, people believe that intelligence, and the truth is we could do this if you go to Gardner's work and you take a look at Gardner's work and multiple intelligences, and he'll talk about musical, interpersonal, spatial. We'll go through all this stuff, right? The athletic stuff. So you could, if you wanted to generalize, we could talk about intelligence in that capacity. But the idea is that we have this, let's just say we have intelligence in whatever domain it might be in. And when we have an entity view of that, we believe that it is fixed, that kids have a specific amount of intelligence, that the outcome or the judgments indicate intelligence, and that everyone can increase skill and knowledge, but they can't all become smarter. What does that mean? That means some people view it as you got what you got. I grew up in a household. My dad, before I was born, he played professional baseball. He was a pitcher with the Cardinals, AAA pitcher with the Cardinals. And he grew up, and listening to him talk not about that, but just kind of expectations and the way that he viewed many things is talking about sports or talking about stuff like that. My dad would say, they call me Rock, and he would say like, Rock, he'd say either you got it or you don't. Either you got it or you don't. It's just like, I can't teach you to throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. Either you got it or you don't. And the idea I'm thinking, oh, okay. I wasn't a big baseball player or fan growing up anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. But the idea is there's something that is in that message, which is that entity view. Like, I can't show you, I can't teach you. And we all know that. We've seen that. Look at these athletes, some of these great athletes, LeBron James or musical gifted people that are musically gifted. They're playing piano and they're classic pianist. It's like, well, when did they start? It's like, oh my God, they had it at 4. It's like, had it at 4? What do you mean it? They had it. You're like, well, what is it? We know what it is. It is some unknown characteristic, aptitude, ability, something that we can't put in a bottle, we can't define. They just have something, right? Could be in math. It could be in. I had a roommate of mine and a good friend from grade school. We were best friends at grade school, and then high school. We went to college together. And this is one of those guys that just was genius at math, right? He's one of those guys that he and I would go out in college and drink a lot of Kool-Aid all night long and get to bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he'd take a shower, go take a Calc 3 test and get 100%. It's like, what the heck? How does that happen, right? He had something. I didn't. He did. Okay. The idea is that this entity view is saying some people have it. Sounds very much like that nature talk, right? The nature nurture discussion, right? Some genetic predisposition, something. On the flip side of that is we have this incremental view, where we look at intelligence as expanding with new skills and knowledge. That intelligence increases with instrumental behavior, and anyone can become smarter with effort and a skill. They become more skillful, more knowledgeable. This is the idea that through practice and learning and developing strategies, that you can get better and smarter and more athletic and more musical and more academically perform better. The idea is this stuff can expand. Entity view, incremental view. Now think about the role that you play as a teacher. I'll be the first one to say that I can look at a classroom and I can look at students in an athletic event, in a musical event, in an academic event, and I'll look at some kid and say, holy cow, that kid's got something, right? They might have something, But if I determine that a student's feeling is only defined by whether they have something, aptitude, ability, if that's how I define it, they have a ceiling, how does that not become reflected in my teaching? What happens when I start looking at some kids that are really poor performers, students with IEPs, special needs, don't perform really well? I'm going to say, in my head, they don't have it. So then how does that impact my teaching? Might I not create a self-fulfilling prophecy for those students and start to expect very little while I expect a great deal from the other students? My expectations influence their behaviors. Their expectations influence their behavior. And so as a teacher, we have to think about, how do I view my students' abilities, their intelligence, their gifts? And if I put a cap on it and say that you could only achieve so much, if I expect very little, what am I going to get from my students? Probably very little. But I expect more from them than they ever would expect from themselves. Just be amazed at how much you get out of your students. Okay? I always tell the story. I might have told this in class while we were still in class. There is that I had a chimina. It was like a big. It's a big. It looks like a fireplace, popular in the Southwest, and it was cast iron, really heavy, that I bought at a store. And I had to get it out of my van and bring it around to the back of my house. And at the time, my oldest daughter was like 15 years old, 100 pounds. And that thing was probably 200 pounds, right? And I just said to her, I said, I need a hand getting it out back. So I pulled out this sled, just a plastic sled, and we put it on the sled. And I asked her to tell her to pull the sled, and I'll push from behind. And we got it out of my van and onto the ground and pushed all the way back to the backyard, up on the deck, up the ramp, on the deck, put together the whole 9 yards. And as soon as I was done with it all, I was like, holy cow, that was really heavy. And she looked at me and she's like, I knew it was heavy. And she was going to tell me, like, why did you do that? And I thought, well, I wasn't going to tell you that we couldn't do it. Why would I do that? Because I knew we could. The idea is placing high expectations for your students is a good thing, not unreasonable expectations, high expectations. If you have this entity view, it's very easy for you to pick winners and losers. Some kids got it, some kids don't. We don't want to do that. We want to have an incremental view, because with an incremental view, every day we're looking for something new and from our students, something that they'll be able to achieve next time. Okay? So the idea is I can take a look at students' behavior as a judge of their motivation. The other thing is how do I judge a student's motivation is I have to look at not just what they do, but perhaps what they say. In the textbook and in the PowerPoint I have in there, I have a theory, and it's called attribution theory. And with attribution theory, it's a theory of how students explain why they are successful or why they fail at a test, in a class, at an activity, at a musical performance, a physical skill task, whatever it might be, right? Artistic task. The idea is they're going to demonstrate, they're going to explain to me why they succeed and why they fail. See, do you hear that? I said explain. That means that their words are going to start telling you something about their motivation. Before I looked at actions, now I listen to words. And with attribution theory, what we find is students typically tend to attribute their success and failure to one of four areas, okay? To ability, to effort, to task difficulty, or to plain old good or bad luck, okay? So as a teacher, my students are going to come into my classroom, and as we go through material and we're learning new things, they're going to talk about their competencies, like, how am I doing in the class? And they'll talk to their friends. Just listen. Just listen to your friends after a test. Listen to your friends after they've completed a homework assignment or an audition for a orchestral piece or a performance, or they're going to join the choir singing. Just listen to what they say. They tell you a lot. Okay? And so as a teacher, I listen. I hear what they say. And sometimes I'll hear students say things like, oh man, like in my college classroom, I'll hear students like, oh, my sister came into town and she wanted to go out to the club, out to the bar, and so we went out, and I knew I had to study, and I thought, I'll get home by 1 and I'll study, or I'll get up early and I'll study. And they're already starting to say, right? And then they realize, oh, I was out later than I thought. Then we got home, and then they wanted to get pizza, and then we got pizza, and we stayed up and talked. We did this and did that. I finally got to sleep at 5 o'clock in the morning. I thought I'd get up at 7 and take a shower and study, and I slept right through till 10:30, and I had to be there by 11:30, and I didn't. And it's like they're telling you everything you need to know. And at that same table, you hear a student say, like, man, I don't know. I did study. I studied so hard. I took a look at the study guide. I read the chapters. I took notes. I just don't get this stuff. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. It's like, it doesn't matter what I do. I just don't get it. When you as a teacher hear those students say those things, they're telling you stuff. You have to listen. What are they telling you? They're telling you about their explanations for why they succeed and why they fail. And pretty soon, they develop a pattern of behavior based on previous experiences, and they start to see themselves a certain way. That's what that attribution theory does for us as teachers. It helps us understand their explanations for their success and for their failure. And how do we change it around so that we can help students focus on the right things as opposed to the wrong things. So we'll talk about attribution theory in the next video.